Origin and cause of disaster. The origin started in the Gulf of Mexico slightly below Louisiana and occurred on April 20th, 2010. The cause of this disaster was an explosion on the Deepwater Horizon oil rig, which caused 134 million gallons of oil to spill. The effect of the disaster, it impacted both the environment and humans, and it affected 4 state shorelines, killed thousands of animals, polluted the water base, and it impacted the human by costing them around $63 billion in legal fees and cleanups, and the cleanup crews suffered worsening in their body system. How to come across the disaster. After a decade from the start of the disaster, the oil spill isn't gone, so by the time um, the disaster occurred, the oil is still there. It caused residue effects such as skin rationing and muscle cramps. An attempt at cleaning the disaster were 1.4 million gallons of chemicals in the water, but it didn't work. Government's action against the Gulf oil spill. The government stopped the drilling activities in the Gulf, and the president by the time, named Barack Obama, created the National Commission to understand the disaster and to prevent it in the future. Pictures of the disaster you can see on the left by that when the year that it occurred, you can see oil in the sand, but after a year, the oil is completely gone. On the right, you can see an island before the disaster occurred, and then right below it, you can see the island covered in oil 2 years after. And these are my sources into.
My man-made disaster project is about the Love Canal. In this area, instead of a great river of water, there was a river of chemicals, horrible chemicals, which if you breathe into it, it's not good for you. And how this all happened was because that there was a chemical leak in an area and it all got exposed and people did not really know until like a very long time, and they kept, since they didn't know, they kept adding more bad chemicals into the tank, which leaded out it to becoming a river of horrible pollution. And if you breathe just near it anywhere, you will have like a bad lung. For example, you might have asthma. And women, since they cannot like do bad things, for example, like smoking or doing drugs, they will have like miscarriages. Well, it's the same point for breathing into this bad chemical. And as you can see in this photo, they're wearing gas masks. They're wearing a full out outfit just so they don't be polluted by this bad chemicals. And 800 families had to evacuate their houses just for this river of bad chemicals. And that's how you know how bad the chemicals were, because literally 800 families had to leave their houses.
This is the Seveso disaster by me. So, what is the Seveso disaster? The Seveso disaster was a man-made disaster that occurred on July 10th, 1976. It was located in Meta, Italy, in the town of Seveso, and it was caused by an explosion at a chemical factory, which released TCDD, or tetrachlorodibenzo P dioxide, into the air. This explosion was caused by an exothermic reaction, where the temperature raised and the reaction mass decomposition slowed, which basically means that the gas formed and the pressure rose, causing an explosion. And in these pictures, you can just see the chemicals mixing and what it caused right here, so the TCDD. And then this is chlorine, this is, I'm pretty sure, sodium hydroxide, and then just, so, hydroxide, and then the high temperature. And then this is how the whole thing basically worked, and this image gives an example of how these chemicals ended up mixing. The effects of the Seveso disaster, environmentally wise, the TCDD that was released got absorbed by the soil, which reduced bioavailability, so it means that the plants wouldn't grow in the affected areas or they would just die. Many people died from cardiovascular and respiratory problems after the Seveso disaster in the area. And also, children born in the area were 6 times more likely to develop thyroid issues, and as well as animals too. The cleanup took between July 1976 to May 1978 to get it all cleaned. And now it's actually a park known as Seveso Oak Forest. And to clean up, they just put all the waste in these bins for nuclear waste, and then also took the affected soil that was contaminated somewhere to treat it. What do they have now to prevent this? Now they have the Seveso Directive, which is a European policy for chemical companies. This policy makes it so that all chemical packages must be labeled and packaged correctly, so you know what chemical it is. And also they must have protection for themselves and the environment, and if they don't go by these policies, they can go to jail. And then this is just a small little image explaining a little bit more into depth about the Seveso Directive. Some interesting facts is the waste from the Seveso disaster was placed into waste drums that was actually used for nuclear waste, so that kind of gives you an idea of how bad the chemicals were. The poison killed 3,000 animals, and about 70,000 other animals had to be killed so that there would be no dioxin in the food chain. And also the chemical cloud that formed reached about 50 meters high during the explosion. And then these are just my cited sources, and I hope you enjoy.
The 2005 Jilin chemical plant explosion. This explosion was a series of chemical blasts which occurred over the course of an hour, taking place in Jilin City, China. On November 13, 2005, residents, students, and even marine life were affected as a result of one simple mistake. T-102, the accident site, held a blockage right inside the plant's processing tower, and a failed attempt by a worker to remove this blockage led to the chemical blast known as the Jilin chemical plant explosion. While there were many series of events following the explosions that caused an uprising in China, the loss of 6 people was one of them. Environmental impacts. The blast allowed toxic slicks to enter into the Songhua River, a large source of water and marine life for Jilin. The blast created several types of pollution to their surface water, groundwater, air, and noise, causing many of the dead fish to appear along the banks of Jilin. As if the oil spills weren't enough to damage their city, fires took place inside of the town, causing destruction and forcing people to move outwards in search of safety. Not only was the toxic pollution a threat to life in the ocean, but to people living in the provinces of China. The explosion allowed many of the residents to come in contact with the pollution containing benzene and nitrobenzene, a known cause for the disease leukemia. With health risks came riots, uprisings, and complaints that the government was failing to protect them from environmental causes. This influenced murder and even assassination. As a result, 6 people were killed in the accident, with 70 injured and 10,000 residents evacuated. At first, government officials decided to take matters into their own hand by shutting down water services and attempting to dilute the contaminants in the water. While others spread awareness through media and reports, China's government enforced campaigns and environmental protection so that the spill was less likely to happen again in the future. Overall, it took China a 5-year plan to be able to fully control the pollution that took place. This is one fact I found interesting about the Jilin chemical plant explosion.
E-Waste in Guyu, China by Jenna Ganal. Location is Guyu is one of the many towns in China. The date is it existed since the 1990s. I couldn't really find a site for the exact date of the disaster. One of the largest e-waste locations as of 2013, and one of the ways the city desperately makes money. Workers are only paid about $1.50 per 16-hour shift. Many countries ship electronic waste there because it's cheaper than getting rid of it the right way. Thousands of workshops in the region dismantle electronics and extract precious materials such as lead, copper, and gold. Effects on humans is traditional recycling methods in Guyu are unsafe, detrimental to workers' health, with lead poisoning affecting about 80% of the children in the city. Workers do not wear protective gear and work barehanded. Water is very contaminated with metals and acids, and miscarriages are above average in the area. A brown area just outside of the town had been dumped with piles of technological waste. Water buffalo grazed and soaked in the wetlands surrounded by mountains of computer components. The massive animals walked through mounds of sheet glass and had simply been stripped from the video displays with ease. Effects will stay till taken care of. The environment and human populations are suffering despite the environmental pollution and poisonous fume pervading the air. Many residents in Guyu claim the conditions have significantly improved over time. They still can't drink the water from the rivers, and they don't dare eat the rice from the farm because it was planted in the waste. Interesting facts are they call Guyu, China, the electronic wastebasket of the world, and Guyu's conservative attempts are primitive, resulting in hazardous contaminants being leached into the earth and surrounding ecosystem.
Union carbide cyanide gas leak. What is the union carbide cyanide gas leak? Well, the place and date is in Bhopal, India in December 3rd, 1984. A gas leaked off of a plant site, inflicting huge amounts of hazardous harm on civilians living in Bhopal. The death toll was around 15,000 to 20,000 people. What were the effects of the gas? Well, the gas contaminated water, rendering it undrinkable. When drank up, the person would be inflicted with a health problem. Problems could range from eye irritations, internal problems, to even blindness at certain times, and that's just to name a few. How did the government take care of the disaster? Alright, this is going to be an important bullet point right here. The government never cleaned the site, as well as the Dow Chemical Company, which owned the plant site. Both did not ever decide to clean the site or take care of it or even take responsibility, as it was too hazardous. How did the government try to reduce the risk of the gas disaster happening again? Well, at first they concealed the plant site, as well as some parts of Bhopal that had been contaminated with the gas, and the government also supplied clean drinking water for the citizens. However, they still did not clean up the plant site. An additional fact would be that the Supreme Court of India had passed an order making the Union Carbide Corporation, the Union Carbide of India Limited, pay for their mistake. That caused a nightmare. My sources are listed down below in a document.
The Exxon Valdez oil spill occurred in Prince William Sound, Alaska on March 24, 1989. When Exxon Valdez, an oil tanker owned by Exxon Shipping Company that was bound for Long Beach, California, struck Prince William Sound. The Exxon Valdez disaster dramatically changed all that, taking a major toll of wildlife. It killed an estimated 250,000 seabirds, 300 otters, 300 seals, 250 bald eagles, and 22 killer whales. The spill had killed an estimated 40% of all sea otters lived in the sound. How long did it take for the disaster to be cleared up, and were there any residual effect? Around 3 years. Cleanup of the Exxon Valdez spill. The entire course of the cleanup operation took around 3 years, from 1989 to 1992, and even now, monitoring of being carried out in the entire length of the coastline to observe any late emerging effects of the oil spill. Cleanup workers skimmed oil from the water surface, sprayed oil dispersant chemicals in the water on the shore, washed oiled beaches with hot water, and rescued and cleaned animals trapped in oil. The state of Alaska sued Exxon over the spill.
and the federal government indicted the company for violating the Clean Water Act. Exxon paid $1 billion in the settlements to the state and federal government, and $300 million in the voluntary settlement with private parties.
Hi, my name is Brandon Payne, and today I will be discussing the Chernobyl nuclear explosion. The Chernobyl disaster happened on April 26, 1986, at a nuclear power station at Chernobyl, Ukraine, in the former Soviet Union. As they were doing a reactor system test, a sudden urge of power destroyed Unit 4. This accident and the fire that followed had released a huge amount of radioactive material into the environment near. The effects of the incident were 2 workers had died because of the explosion. Although the severe radiation had killed 28 of the site's 600 workers within the 4 months of the incident, about 200,000 cleanup workers had received doses between 1 and 100 rem between 1986 and 1987. The resulting steam explosion had ended up releasing 5% of the radioactive reactor core into the environment. Due to this, it caused many radioactive material in several places near Europe. The cleanup and effects. Workers started cleaning 2 months after the incident. Some of them have died to the radiation, and it still is being cleaned up today. Researchers and scientists are trying to figure out if it's safe for animals and humans to go back into the area. The only effects of the radiation, including caesium-137 and iodine-131. What the government is doing. They are making specific organizations that provide radiation-protected issues. Shut down 3 other reactors in Chernobyl. They even cut down and buried a pine forest about a square mile to reduce radioactive contamination. And they are also making sure more workers that work are trained. Interesting facts. The radiation in Chernobyl is still alive, and the animals there might be radioactive. Nobody actually lives in Chernobyl. The first alert about the disaster was sent out to Sweden. Thank you for watching my presentation.
Libby asbestos contamination. Libby asbestos is asbestos fibers from the dust and soil contaminated by the town's now defunct plant that produces vermiculite, a mineral used in insulation and gardening. Location in Libby, Montana, traced back to 1919 when companies first started pulling vermiculite out of the mines in Libby. Asbestos is contaminated with amphibole asbestos fibers. Asbestos contaminated the soil where miners were working and mining. People in the Libby area have elevated levels of disease and death associated with exposure to asbestos. Cleanup and government. They've removed more than 1 million cubic yards of contaminated soil. Asbestos-related disease among Libby's won't stop any time soon thanks to the asbestos-related cancer, such as mesothelioma, that can take 20 to 50 years to manifest. The government helped remove the contaminated soil. EPA is currently evaluating different treatment technologies that could be implemented to reduce exposure to LA in soil, duff, water, sediment, and mine waste. Interesting fact. Libby asbestos contamination has gone down as America's worst man-made environmental disasters.
Ecocide in Vietnam, Agent Orange by Jimmy Romero. Location, Tai Nam Bao, Vietnam. Date, August 10th, 1961. Aircraft sprayed Agent Orange. The land is still poisoned. Cause, during the Vietnam War, the U.S. sprayed Agent Orange. They sprayed crops that fed soldiers in forests that might have people in them. They did this so they could have a leverage in the war. Effects Agent Orange had. Agent Orange was used for an advantage. Agent Orange was used as a blend of tactical herbicides, which was used to remove tree leaves and dense tropical cover that would help them reveal the Vietnamese. It ruined crops. The U.S. wanted it to ruin their food supply because they thought these were the farms feeding the soldiers. It ruined their water supply because it poisoned it all. How it impacted humans. 58,000 people died in combat, and 300,000 veterans died from Agent Orange. Short-term exposure could lead to your skin darkening, liver problems, and chloracne. It is also linked to type 2 diabetes, immune system dysfunction, nerve disorders, muscular dysfunction, hormone disruption, and heart disease. How long it took to get cleaned up. They were not able to pick it up since it had already been put into their water sources and crops. There are effects that have stayed there and continue to poison people. What has been done? The U.S. launched a 10-year program which cost them $183 million for a cleanup operation. What the government has done, they started a program that cleans up the soil to get Agent Orange out. They also store the soil into storages and heat them up to kill the poison. And also the government stopped making Agent Orange. These are the pictures. An interesting fact would be Agent Orange is a fat soluble, which means plants and animals and people get it by touching or eating or drinking it. And these are my sources.
Hi, my name is Calvin Yu, and this is my project on the Prince William Sound Alaska oil spill. The Prince William Sound Alaska oil spill happened at Billy Reid in Alaska. This event happened on March 24th, 1989. The cause of this disaster is the captain of the ship was drinking and let a third mate that was not licensed drive the ship, which resulted in the oil spill. The effects it had on the environment was that hundreds of thousands of seabirds, otters, seals, and whales died due to the oil spill. The oil spill had an effect on the humans. For example, there were $300 million of economic harm to more than 32,000 people who depended on fishing for their livelihood. It took about 3 years to get cleaned up, and Prince William Sound was thriving with animals before, and now it is not. Exxon federal responders and 11,000 Alaskan residents worked hard to clean up the oil spill. Exxon also paid around $2 billion in cleanup costs and around $1.8 billion for habitat restoration and personal damages related to the spill. The government is adding more strict rules to reduce the risk of another oil spill. The Congress also passed the Oil Pollution Act of 1990, which makes the Coast Guard to strengthen the regulations of oil tank vessels and oil tank owners and the people who operate them. Some interesting facts are that there were oil contaminations remaining on more than half of the 91 beach sites tested in Prince William Sound. The oil that was spilled could have filled the 125 Olympic-sized pools. There were 4 deaths that was involved with the cleanup efforts, and even after 12 years of the oil spill, you could still find oil on half of the 91 randomly selected beaches that were surveyed.
Deepwater Horizon is an offshore oil platform in the Gulf of Mexico that suffered a massive oil spill following an explosion in April 2010. It occurred 41 miles away from Louisiana. The explosion took place on the night of April 20th, and the rig sunk 2 days later. This happened because natural gas leaked and traveled up to the platform, igniting the rig. 134 million gallons of oil were released in just 87 days. 1 million birds and thousands of marine life were killed, and diseases increased among animals. This incident killed 11 and injured 17 people. Oil that has sunk may affect future groundwater supplies as well. It took 48,000 professionals and 87 days to clean the whole thing up. Although, even now, dolphin and bird population has not recovered, and coastal residents claim health issues as well. 1.4 gallons of chemical dispersant were sprayed across the ocean for treatment. However, it has done more damage than help. The government has now made the Oil Pollution Act, which punishes people responsible for oil spills, and they make sure that these rigs use safe vessel designs as well. One shocking thing is that 8,000 animals were found dead 6 months after the spill, and over 16 miles of the coastlines were affected. Here are the sources.
London's deadliest fog took place in the City of London and the country of United Kingdom. It occurred during the month of December and the year 1952. The cause of the disaster was industrial pollution such as burning coal and burning fossil fuels. The effect the disaster had on the environment was it killed thousands of plants and contaminated water sources. It took a few weeks to clear up. What has been done to clear the mess up? Set up smoke-free areas. Homeowners now use electricity instead of coal. What the government has done is started a Clean Air Act and banned big companies to stop burning coal. Some interesting facts are it covered the entire city for 5 days, it resulted in about 12,000 human deaths, and you can barely see your shoes if you were to look down.
Talk about pitcher lead contamination. Where the disaster occurred. Location: United States, Oklahoma, Ottawa, Ghost Town. Dates: September 1st, 2009. This contaminated water begins to steep from the mines in 1973. Cause of the disaster. The underground water was contaminated with ridiculous level of the lead. 46% people had unsafe level of the lead in their blood. The mining induced odor soil that made sinkhole and cave-in serious risk. The sinkhole deep was about 8 feet. Effects on environment and human. The population in 2000 was 1,640 people. In 2010, it dropped it to 20 people. Today, it dropped it to 0 people. So today, they call Ghost Town. All the water was pollution. Animal, plants, or people cannot live in there. How long it take to clean up? Program manager with the Oklahoma Department of the Environment Quality. We don't know how long it take to clean up, but they are keep trying to clean up the Oklahoma pitcher. Example of what was done to clean up. In April 24, 2006, the government decided to shut down the pitcher of lead contamination because of the days too much of the environment risk. They moved its residents to other place. They shut down mines to reduce the risk. They spent $301 million. How is government is reducing the risk of this happening again? The government recommend to do reducing the risk is that wash hands and toys, clean dusty surface, remove shoes before entering the house, runs cold water. The government keeps working on this regulation.
The QA oil fires. The location where this disaster happened was in QA, Asia. The date where it happened was February 1991. Fires burned for 10 months and over 650 oil wells were damaged and almost 75 more. Fires were caused by Iroquois military forces setting fire to a report of 605 to 732 oil wells along with an unspecified number of oil-filled low-lying areas. The effects on the environment were the fires were estimated at 133, 0.8, and 8 million metric tons, respectively. Total carbon dioxide emissions were estimated to be 2% of global emissions from burning of fossil fueling biomass. The impact on humans were the burning oil wells discharge on a high volume of potentially toxic pollutants into the air. Compared with baseline, symptoms reported more frequently for the QI period were eye and upper respiratory tract irritation, shortness of breath, cough, rashes, and fatigue. They controlled the oil fires by taking raging fires, managed the environmental respiration, and reconstructed Asia's oil pollution facilities. In just 9 months, Bleachell exhausted and caped 650 damaged or burning oil wells in QI.
The topic I will be talking about is the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl began in 1930s and mostly took place in the Great Plains of the United States, such as Kansas, Colorado, Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico. The name Dust Bowl was given by a news reporter. The main cause of a dust bowl is when there are unusual high temperatures or changes in regional weather, high wind, overplowing lands, and a long period of drought. Farmers overplowing lands can cause a dust bowl because preparing soil is the first step, but farmers plowed the soil too finely, which can cause the dirt to pulverize hard dirt into small clods, which can form the dust bowl. Some of the effects that the Dust Bowl caused the economy include poor air quality, damaged crops, insect infestations, animals being blinded, and long periods of drought. Cattle got blinded by the dust and suffocated because of how much dust they would inhale. Since there was a long period of drought, the plants couldn't survive long and died too, which meant not much supply of food for people.
Island by Dominic Ramos. This man-made disaster happened during the early morning hours on March 28, 1979 at the Unit 2 reactor. The cause of this disaster was a mechanical failure that set off an unlikely series of events that led to a partial meltdown without the employees noticing until it was too late. It took 2 hours and 45 minutes for an employee to notice that the radiation levels were going 350 times the normal level of radiation that can be held in the unit. They declared a state of emergency. Scientists said that the radiation that was leaked into the atmosphere was too minuscule to bring any harm to humans or animals. There is no proof that the cow genetic mutation was caused by the radiation leak on 3 Mile Island and Bullet Point 2. The cleanup process was long and expensive, but after the extensive radioactive scrubbing was complete, the harmful substances were safely disposed of or evaporated. The waste was transported to Hanford Waste Disposal Site from the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant, and this helped the wildlife in the surrounding area to get back to its green self. The NRC put many new policies in place to help prevent an event like this from ever happening again. The most interesting fact I found was that they made a robot specifically to sample and dispose of toxic waste. This was helpful because it was too dangerous in the reactors for the humans to enter. Here are my sources, and thank you for your time.
Disease by Dina Schumann, period 4. Mina-Mater disease was first occurred in 1932 through 1968 and was barely discovered in 1956 of May. It happened from the Chesapeake Corporation's chemical factory from the leakage of the methyl mercury in the industrial wastewater. The cause of this was from the daily consumption of large quantities of fish and shellfish that were heavily contaminated with toxic chemicals generated in the chemical factories, and then it was discharged into the sea. Mina-Mater disease is a methylmercury poisoning with neurological symptoms which causes this. The effects on humans cause a lot of exhaustion and a bunch of health issues, and for the environment, every polluted thing that the fish got was what humans got, and there was a bunch of health damage. The cleanup was by stopping the chemicals and trying to get them removed. Since it was barely recognized and discovered in May 1956, the chemicals in the sea kept increasing and increasing, so it got to a really, really large point where it was hard to take it out. To not get this disease, you needed to eliminate your consumption of fish and shellfish. The government did health examinations and installed water purification tanks, but it had not solved the issue. It's still around till this day for more than 65 years, but it's not as a large amount.
Hello, my name is Brendan Tabone. The disaster I selected is dioxin pollution. Dioxin pollution is a highly poisonous chemical caused by the burning of fuel and waste. It can also be caused by volcanoes and forest fires. A major disaster happened in Seveso, Italy on July 10, 1976. It was called the Seveso disaster when a small chemical manufacturing plant processing trichlorophenol was interrupted during its process, and the reactor relief valve opened and caused the release of the dioxin pollutants. Dioxin pollutants are found throughout the environment, air, water, soil, just to name a few. Dioxin pollutants has bad effects on humans. It can cause problems in the heart, lungs. It can cause various types of cancers, sterility, and diabetes. In animals, dioxins cause miscarriages, changes in their immune system, birth defects, and even death. The cleanup and prevention starts with the Environmental Protection Agency passing several environmental laws that are directly related to dioxin. Dioxin in some cases can be washed away with rainwater after it breaks down in the sunlight. For us humans, dioxins can be reproduced by trimming fat in meats and dairy products, but more importantly, a balanced diet can prevent it.
Great Pacific Garbage Patch Project by Wilbur Wilson. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is also known as the Pacific Trash Vortex. It spans waters from the west coast of North America to Japan. The patch is actually comprised of the Western Garbage Patch located near Japan and the Eastern Garbage Patch located between the United States of Hawaii and California. A Californian sailor discovered the patch in 1997 and is still to this day growing. Garbage patch forms from the debris emerging from what is known as the North Pacific Subtropical Convergence Zone, which is located only 700 kilometers from the coast of Hawaii. At this convergence zone, warm water from the South Pacific intersects with cooler water from the Arctic, resulting in a jet stream-like vortex that creates and accumulates trash around. The circular motions of the outer walls of the gears draw in trash that float from the land, and it piles up into the gear center, thus creating the garbage patch. Another reason why the garbage patch has persisted is because of the fact that much of the debris that makes its way to the vortex is not biodegradable, meaning it cannot be absorbed by the water and broken down naturally by the environment. Instead, items like plastic are broken down into microplastics, which can be even more harmful to sea species, which further is proliferating the life of the garbage patch. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch effects. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is an area in the Pacific where plastic collects because of the ocean's currents. Animals will ingest small amounts of the plastic, which can cause hormone disruption and death from poison. Humans often believe that the Great Pacific Garbage Patch does not affect them very much because the garbage patch is located in the center of the Pacific Ocean, thousands of miles away from the coast. However, these people are wrong. In fact, we humans harm and pollute ourselves. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch and plastic pollution generally is killing marine life. 1 million seabirds and 100,000 marine mammals are affected every year, as well as many other species. For example, turtles often mistake plastic bags for prey, such as jellyfish. Disaster cleanup. The Ocean Cleanup Project was founded by an entrepreneur named Boyan Slant in 2013. The Ocean Cleanup is a non-profit organization that plans to carry out what it refers to as the largest cleanup in history. Environmental organizations. The Ocean Cleanup has been collecting plastic waste using a 600-liter floating barrel. The first haul of waste cleared from the graves of the garbage patch has been returned to shore. The 600 batch, measuring to 1 cubic meter, each contained everything from discarded fishing nets to microplastics. Government help. The government is helping by increasing funding for cleanup efforts. Government is also helping by creating agencies that have expanded their cleanup work. And they have established marine monuments on the northwestern Hawaiian lands to help.